walked out. He never came back.
Police have to kind of be scratching their heads because it wasn't the kind of thing where Tito had a lot of money, that he was robbed.
But Lieutenant Joe Kenda soon learns this hardworking man
Tell you how beautiful you look tonight.
was harboring some explosive secrets.
He had a reputation as a ladies' man.
We're looking for someone.
Tito's parents tell police, well, you need to look into the crowbar incident.
People always say that these things are a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. You are never certain when gunfire might begin. Any second, or maybe never, but you have to be prepared for that possibility.
It's the middle of the night. Officer Carey's patrolling the Stratton Meadows area.
Though so far it's been a quiet night. Due to a recent spike in gang violence, patrolmen like Peter Carey are on high alert.
Well, right away, as a police officer, you also have to be very cautious because you don't know what you're coming up on.
And in a cul-de-sac on the south side of town, Officer Carey's night takes a dramatic turn.
And he notices in the shadows what looks to be a man bent over.
Hey, stop right there. Right there. Stop right there.
And he sees the figure look at him.
There are occasions when I could not sleep. I'm awake. I haven't been to sleep. When I would get up and walk around the house quietly, no lights on, look out the windows, just to maybe help me relax a little bit so I could go to sleep.
Miss Kenda. Stratton Meadows? Okay. Let's get Detective Anderson on the scene. He knows that neighborhood.
At that time, I was a sergeant, so it was my job to assign detectives to the case.
Ought to be there soon.
I wrote a note to Kathy telling her where I went, and I took off. It's a working class area, a relatively low rent area at the time. A lot of older buildings near active railroad tracks, that kind of a neighborhood.
Hey, good morning, Sergeant.
Anderson? So what we got?
Gunshot victim.
I was notified by Joe Kenda to come to the scene that I'd be in charge of doing the crime scene investigation. When I arrived, the victim had already been transported to the hospital, and he had been shot once in the head.
Currently in critical condition. Doesn't appear he's gonna make it.
Any idea on him?
Yeah, his name is Kenneth Valdez. Seems like the neighbors know him as Tito.
Tito and I were pretty close. He's my first cousin, and people respected him.
Do we have any leads yet?
First officer here, Officer Carey, detained a witness named Harold Ayers. We don't think he's involved in the shooting, though.
Wanna take me where they found the body?
Sure, right down here.
He says Tito also has a common law wife that they've had children together, and her name is Alberta. And he points at an older pickup truck and says that's Tito's truck, and he lives in this area. We walk over to the spot where Tito's body was. There's a little bit of blood on the asphalt and a set of keys, probably Tito's.
It's kind of late for a stroll around the block. Maybe he's headed home.
He is exposed. He's apparently on foot in this area when he takes a gunshot wound to the forehead. How did he come to be here?
Officer Carey says he thinks that the head wound was caused by a large caliber weapon. We can't find any shell casings.
Yeah. Take a look at those skid marks.
I see acceleration skid marks in the street. So that says to me that whoever did this is probably in that car. And those acceleration marks are in flight after the shot is fired. How many people in this car, we don't know. At any rate, the car is most likely involved in this.
Let's go talk to the witness. Is that him over there?
Yeah, it's
We were fortunate that the reporting party was still there, so I was able to talk to Mr. Ayers about what he had seen, what he had heard.
Mr. Ayers, how did you know Mr. Valdez?
The guy that got shot? Actually, I don't know him. I just live on this block with my wife. We were out this morning when everything happened.
He said that they were taking a road trip, and he wanted to make sure that they got an early start before traffic. They were loading up the car with their suitcases.
Hey, can you go grab the cooler when you go back inside?
Oh, sure. Hey, do we need more ice?
I think we're okay.
I heard car tires screeching, so I looked up and I see this dark red sedan peeling out.
Then he goes over to see what happened and finds our victim.
Luckily, one of your officers was driving around in the area, although I think he thought I shot him, so we're gonna sort that out.
See any details on the vehicle? License plate number?
I didn't catch the number, but I'm pretty sure it had California plates.
And what was interesting is Officer Carey reported seeing that same vehicle leaving the area.
So we know that we're looking for a sedan. And even if you can't get the license plate number, if you can get the state, especially an out-of-state license plate, that's very helpful.
Did you see anyone in the car?
It was dark, but it was just the driver, I'm sure. He was wearing a ball cap, but I couldn't get a good look.
I'm gonna put out a bolo in the suspect vehicle.
All right, thanks.
Hey, I hate to be such a bother, but we really need to get going.
Thank you for the information. I hope you can still enjoy your trip.
He's got a good attitude, but he's told this story now 2 or 3 times to 2 or 3 different policemen. He's still concerned about getting to his destination, which is perfectly understandable.
With little to go on, Kenda and Anderson decide to speak with the victim's common-law wife, Alberta Gonzalez.
I'm sorry. I'm just so shocked right now.
She is incredibly distraught, shocked, crying. Her demeanor and the way she presents is a clear indicator she has no knowledge of this or no involvement in it.
He had a nice wife, my cousin Alberta. She was good to him.
I'm sorry, Alberta. Do you know what Tito was doing up at this late hour?
Yeah, he was doing someone a favor.
She said he was helping friends move into an apartment.
He called me and said that it turned into a little party to celebrate the move. No big deal. He came home a little after 2.
And told her as he came in the door, he realized that his tools and his work equipment was at his father's house.
He was supposed to work in the morning, so he was going to drive over to his dad's house and get the tools and come right back. But he didn't even make it to his truck.
He walked out, he never came back. So we now know he was walking to his truck when somebody interrupted that with a bullet.
Can you tell us about these friends that Tito was helping to move?
Jose and Galina Torres, they just moved down the block.
Shortly after sunrise, the detectives head to the Torres residence.
It's really important to get as much information as you can as soon as you possibly can. So in this case, we felt it was important to wake a number of people up to find out who was at the party.
Something wrong?
Galina, what's going on?
We need to talk to you about your friend, Tito Valdez.
Is he okay?
I'm afraid we have some very bad news.
They were very, very surprised that Tito Valdez had been shot and that he was hospitalized.
There's a strong chance he won't make it.
Oh my God, he was just here.
Khalifa's.
Was it?
This was Khalifa's.
They were soldiers from California, hardcore gang members that were serviced in the Army here in Fort Carson.
They are an association of friends who call themselves a gang to protect each other from insult and name-calling. They defend their honor at all costs.
You should come inside.
Now, this is a major problem. If we're dealing with gangs, there may be a lot more body bags before this is over. We have Tito Valdez shot in the forehead. We're trying to determine if that motive lies somewhere in the gang world and is connected to the car with California plates.
Right away, they're thinking, was Tito somehow involved in a gang? Was this a drive-by shooting?
You can have a seat there.
So Tito's having issues with Khalifa's?
No, not Tito. But we had a little party last night, and some of our friends are in Los Meadows Burritos.
He said his associates belong to Los Barrios, which is a neighborhood Hispanic gang in this area. These people are not in the drug business. They don't do contract homicides. They don't do anything that gangs do.
Stratton Meadows neighborhood was claimed as a gang. We were never a gang. We were one big family, and we stuck together, and we took care of our neighborhood.
So, wait, Tito's not involved in Los Meadows Barrios?
Right. He's just friends with everyone.
That was a little bit of a surprise to me, since that's where Tito and his family and his friends all grew up.
I think this could have anything to do with the Asplin shooting. You know that trial's going on right now.
Yeah, man. Everyone's been on edge around here. Chris Romero was actually here tonight with Tito. They're best friends.
We had a shooting in the recent past where two members of the Khalifas had shot a member of Los Meadows Barrios, a Mr. Chris Romero.
He survives it, but there's a lot of hostility within both those gangs.
That case was investigated. Two Khalifas were arrested and are charged with attempted first-degree murder.
You know, it's a miracle Chris is alive. You know, I told him to keep his head down till this whole trial thing is over with.
So why don't you walk us through what happened tonight?
Well, we just moved in yesterday, and it just turned into a little party. Yeah, having a good time though. Just
Hey, there's nothing left in here.
Well, what time is it? We go pick some more up.
You guys want to get some more?
Yeah, that'd be great.
The party giver says that around 10 o'clock, Tito and two friends named Chris and Ron collect money from the crowd and they make a beer run.
So did they come back with the beer?
I think so, but I don't know. We were in the other room, but I don't know what happened to Tito.
Well, obviously, Chris and Ron do. What if they went out and encountered the Khalifas at the liquor store? Now, are they angry about their people going to jail?
Does Ron have a last name?
Castro.
All right. Thank you very much.
So, please give us a call if you hear anything else.
So now we need to find Chris and Ron and find what they have to say about this beer run.
Fortunately, Detective Anderson already knows where Chris Romero lives.
Hey, where you headed at this hour?
Detectives, I'm on my way to work. What you guys doing here? What's up?
My detectives established rapport in this neighborhood, and Anderson had established a relationship with him to where they could get information when other officers couldn't.
Hey, this is Sergeant Kenda. We're working a shooting that just happened. Your friend Tito got shot. We're thinking of drive-by.
What? Who did this to him?
We don't know. That's why we need your help.
Hey, I heard you and Tito were at a party last night. Did you guys get in any trouble?
No, man, not when I was with them. I had to go to work early, so Ron and Tito picked me up, and then they dropped me off back at the house. I don't know what happened after that.
Chris seemed entirely believable. We will check his alibi, but for our purposes, I really don't think he knows what happened to his friend.
All right, we'll let you get to work. Sorry about your friend.
Yeah.
Hey, call me if you hear anything.
I will, man.
As we're leaving,
Hey, Anderson.
he says he saw a strange car cruising the neighborhood the last couple of days.
You guys looking for the same car?
And what it look like?
Red sedan, California plates. They were definitely looking for someone.
People always say that these things are a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences.
So that sent up signals that perhaps there was some connection for this shooting with Tito.
What the guy look like?
Had a cap on, probably a white guy.
All right, thanks for the help.
Thanks.
Now, who is that guy? And who is he looking for? And what motivates him to be in this neighborhood? Is this part of our shooting? It certainly could be.
Hoping to get a statement from the victim, Kenda and Anderson head to St. Francis Hospital.
Excuse me. Can you tell me the status of one of your patients, Kenneth Tito Valdez?
Sure. It doesn't look like there's much we can do for him.
Tito's condition is extremely critical. The bullet enters his forehead, goes through the center of his brain, and stops at the back of his skull.
He's lost all brain function, and so it's just a matter of time before they pronounce him.
Is his family here?
Yeah, they're right back there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Our next move was to see who we could talk to there. We knew that Tito's parents and his sister were there. We talked to his father.
Mr. Valdez, we're so sorry about your son. We need to ask you a few questions.
I said, we are here to find out who hurt your son. That's what we're here for. You can help us with that to get to the bottom of this.
We will do anything to help.
Was your son having any problems with anyone recently?
Actually, I know who did this to my son. He tried to kill him already.
He said the guy stabbed him with a crowbar.
Really?
Well, now, did he trade his crowbar for a gun? We're investigating the shooting of Kenneth Valdez, who is known as Tito. He's not expected to survive, and we just learned that someone tried to kill him in the past by stabbing him with a crowbar.
Can you tell us about this stabbing incident?
Tito was leaving a party over in Deerfield Hills when it happened.
Hey, what you looking at, man?
That was good.
Nothing, man.
Nah, you looking at something, man. What you looking at? Huh?
I said I ain't looking at nothing. Yo, it's okay.
They never really knew why it happened, why this person picked him.
He got away from them, but he spent a week in the hospital.
Do you know this guy's name?
No one knows. You should talk to your friends on the force. It was never solved.
When did this occur?
It was a little over a year ago.
Since the police weren't able to track down who that suspect was that attacked Tito, doing it now was going to be equally challenging.
Unfortunately, it happened so long ago, I think it's unlikely to be connected to our shooting.
Well, thank you for the information. We'll be in touch.
We're sorry about your son, Mr. Valdez.
With little to go on, detectives believe their best chance at moving the investigation forward is by locating Tito's friends.
Here's the files you asked for.
Thanks. Any word on around Castro's whereabouts?
Not yet. The team is out trying to locate him. Word is moves around a lot.
Ron Castro is another person that left the housewarming party with Tito, and so police want to track him down as well to find out what's going on.
In the meantime, we're trying to see what we can find out about that car that was seen leaving the crime scene.
Excuse me, Sergeant. We've got someone who wants to talk to you about the Valdez case, a Ron Castro.
Wow, that was fast.
See what he has to say.
Thank you.
Castro was no stranger to the police department, so he came in.
Heard you wanted to see me? Look, I didn't do anything.
Okay, I was just with Tito buying some beer.
Well, we're not accusing you of doing anything. We're just trying to find out who did this to your friend. Why don't you walk us through what happened at the party?
It was a pretty low-key party. We ran out of beer. And so me and Tito went out to get some beer at the liquor store.
Yo, we're here.
Hey, welcome.
Thank you.
They met a couple girls that they kind of casually know. So they come back with beer and two girls who are now at the party. Tito, as it turns out, had a reputation as a ladies' man. He wasn't particularly loyal to his common-law wife.
Come on, Tino, make me a drink.
You got it, babe.
According to Ron Castro, though the two girls were friendly and flirtatious, they often ran with a crowd that wouldn't be welcome at a Los Barrios get-together.
He thinks that possibly this could be something involving jealousy and gang members.
And they were loosely affiliated with the rival gang, the Khalifas. One drew our attention immediately. Her name's Gata, that is Spanish for cat, and she had a bit of a reputation for sleeping around with members of both gangs.
Tell you how beautiful you look tonight?
Yeah, tell me again.
So he's all over Gata, and they're having a good time. So what is Tito unwittingly doing? He is playing with a grenade with the pin almost out.
Yeah, those barrios know how to throw a good party. What?
Then a little bit later, I heard Gata arguing with somebody over the phone.
Well, you didn't want to take me out. So what was I supposed to do? Stay home?
She's talking to somebody from the Khalifas because he hears her say that. So what is Gata doing? Stirring the pot with a radioactive spoon. That's what she's doing. She's playing this game.
Just stop, okay? No, I'm not leaving. Stop.
And then she got off the phone and went to go look for Tito.
Ron also tells us that Tito leaves with Gata for about 20 minutes. When Tito comes back, he says that he had sex with Gata.
But here's the thing. When them two snuck up to fool around, these two guys showed up, looking for her.
One is a white male, the other is a Hispanic male, and he's never seen either one of them before.
Hey, can I help you?
We're looking for someone.
She goes by Gata. She's a pretty little thing. You seen her?
Oh, yeah, she just left with Tito.
Where'd they go?
They didn't say.
Hey, bro, let's get out of here. And just like that, they took off.
Now we have to find out if there's a jealous lover who's now after Tito for being with his girlfriend.
Where can we find this woman?
Give me the pen. She's not really that hard to find.
So finding her and finding out through her who these two guys were, that becomes very important.
Yeah? What do you want?
Sergeant Kenda, Detective Anderson. We're looking for Gata.
That's me.
She's a beautiful girl, but you can tell she partied hard the night before.
We need to talk to you about Tito Valdez.
Okay, what?
We heard you were at a Los Barrios party with Tito last night.
No. Who said that? I was with my roommate at a bar last night.
So you do or you don't know Tito Valdez?
I know Tito, I just wasn't with him last night.
She denies leaving the party in his company.
Frankly, I don't care who you did or didn't leave with. We're looking for two guys we think you know.
We want to know, who is it that you called from the party? Was it your boyfriend? Were you trying to make him jealous?
No, I don't know what you're talking about. I actually don't remember much from last night. Maria! I wasn't messing with Tito last night, was I?
Oh, you did. You lived to party with him.
Wow. I don't remember. He must have been pretty drunk.
It's believable that she is that drunk. They drink every day, and they drink to excess every day. So we're not getting anywhere with these girls when all of a sudden my radio goes off.
Kenda?
Excuse me. Go for Kenda.
Sergeant, patrol has eyes on a dark red four-door sedan with California tags and a white male driver.
They report that he has found a vehicle matching description in the area of the shooting.
They're going to make contact and are requesting backup.
10-4, we're on the way. Kenda out. All right, we gotta go. Thanks for the information. We'll be in touch.
While Kenda and Anderson race to the scene, Officer Everett Purdue and his partner are preparing to make contact with the driver.
Hey, keep your hands where I can see them.
You have no idea who this person is or what he's capable of. You take no chances. We're investigating the shooting of Tito Valdez, who is not going to survive. Patrol officers have stopped a car with California plates that match the suspect description. They're going to approach the driver with extreme caution.
We were very interested in finding out who that person was and what evidence might be in that vehicle.
Is there anything I can do for you today, officer?
Yes, sir. I need you to step out of the vehicle and keep your hands right where I can see them.
He's very calm. That's pretty unusual.
Step right back here.
I run a red light or something?
No, your vehicle matches the description of a vehicle used in a shooting last night. Do you have any ID on you?
It's in my pocket. You mind?
Go ahead and get it. Step over here with my partner. Sir, stand right here.
He has not one driver's license, but two, and they're both in different names with his picture on them.
How is it that you have two state IDs? One says that you're Raymond Oland and one says that you're Raymond Parker? How does that work? I need you to put your hands on the car, sir.
That's a major red flag. People who have different identifications are usually fugitives from justice.
Do you have any weapons in the car or on your person that we need to know about?
No.
He looks in the floorboard front passenger side. He sees 3 or 4 large jars stuffed full of coins. Then he looks in the back seat.
You got a gun. Hey, go ahead and hook him.
And they did see in plain view in the back seat a short-barreled black revolver.
Minutes later, Kenda and Anderson arrive on the scene.
I've got a suspect in my car. The gun's still in his car and nobody's touched it.
Man, thank you.
When I get there, I look at this gun.
Yeah, looks like one round's been fired.
It's a 5-shot, 38 caliber revolver with a 2-inch barrel.
When we recover the bullet from the victim, we'll be able to see if they match up.
I am totally convinced that one shot is in Tito Valdez's forehead from our man with 2 driver's licenses.
I'll go ahead and bag that for me. Yes, sir. See what he has to say.
He's sitting in the back in handcuffs. He's still very calm.
So I got a quick question for you.
Okay.
What's the penalty in this state for felony assault?
It's pretty serious.
So what's going to happen to my car?
Well, it's going to be impounded.
You going to need to write a receipt for me then?
A receipt? For what?
He also makes a point to say that there's money in that car. Lots of money in his estimation.
You mean the coins?
Yeah, well, that all adds up, doesn't it?
You're under arrest for the attempted first-degree murder of Tito Valdez.
Yeah. I'm going to need all that money now, aren't I?
You know you have the right to remain silent. You won't talk to us?
No. I want my attorney.
Well, all right then. It's as if he's confessing to this without doing so.
All right, get him out of here.
He's a very experienced criminal, and we don't scare him, and the system doesn't scare him either.
While Ray Parker, a.k.a. Ray Oland, is brought down to the station to be booked, Kenda heads back to his office to review the case.
I don't believe that Mr. Parker was driving down the street and selected Tito Valdez as the only pedestrian and shot him. We need to learn what the connection is between Parker, the gun, the money in the car, the Khalifas, and Tito Valdez.
Kenda.
Dispatch informed me on the phone that Tito Valdez is pronounced dead from a gunshot wound to the head.
And it's tragic because he was a young man with 2 children. He had loving family members, his parents, his sister, and his death touched a lot of people in that community. And it's a tragic loss.
Well, we officially have a homicide on our hands. Parker's facing a first-degree murder charge.
His body's transferred to the El Paso County morgue, where we will recover the bullet, which is still in his head, and compare it to the weapon we found in Parker's back seat.
I looked into that gun. It's got an interesting history, actually.
How so?
Seems it was taken in a burglary about 10 years ago.
It turns out that the weapon might have been part of an insurance fraud.
Did you find anything in his background check?
Yeah, a few things.
We checked with California. He has a criminal history, but it's not that serious. He has a wife, but he's left her.
We're still trying to locate her. He's down in processing.
All right, let's get his mugshot into a photo lineup and circulate it to all the people who were at the house party and to Tito's family. Now, maybe that'll jog her memory.
Got it.
Police have to establish some kind of connection between Parker and Tito. And one of the things they have to figure out is this a premeditated murder?
Nobody seems to know who Raymond Parker is. He's not a member of the Khalifas, as far as anybody knows.
Jose, you recognize anybody on there?
Nah. No one from Los Videos or Khalifas.
Did anybody on that sheet show up at your house party looking for Gata?
Gata? I remember 2 guys were looking for her, but no. Neither guy is on here.
What about this guy? You recognize him?
Never saw him in my life.
All right, well, thank you.
As far as we can tell, he had nothing to do with Gata. There was no earlier connection that we were aware of with Tito.
The next day, Kenda and Anderson switch gears and delve into Ray Parker's background.
We determined that Mr. Parker was employed as a short order cook at a restaurant in Colorado Springs. We go to this restaurant.
So what do you want to know about Ray?
We identify his best friend in the restaurant is another cook by the name of David Gillespie.
He's only been in the Springs a few months. We share an apartment together.
Well, what kind of guy is he?
Quiet, does his job, good worker.
Did you ever know him to carry a gun?
I mean, he's never talked about owning one. Do you mind if I smoke?
Go ahead. Have you ever mentioned any problems with Kenneth Valdez? Goes by Tito?
Doesn't ring any bells. I know he had problems with some guy in California.
David says, well, Ray Parker had recently separated from his wife. He caught her in bed with another man.
Got real broken up about it. Left her, moved here, but he never mentioned anything about Tito.
I'm looking at this guy, and I can tell he's holding back on me. Now, why is that?
David, I can tell that you're not telling us something.
I'm being straight with you.
Don't waste our time.
Damn it. Someone broke into our apartment, robbed my bedroom.
One of the key pieces of information we learned is that David, the co-worker, did have a gun, and that gun had been stolen.
It was a .38 special.
Why didn't you report the burglary?
I couldn't. I didn't legally own the gun.
So he was afraid if he admitted he was in possession of a stolen firearm, that would arrest him.
We were able to confirm that the gun originally was stolen so many years ago that the statute of limitations had run its course.
Was anything else missing?
I had a bunch of money gone. I've been saving up change for months. All gone. I had some cassettes missing too.
Well, we know where they are now, don't we? They're in Mr. Parker's car. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to connect that event.
Kenda and Anderson believe Ray Parker stole the money, cassettes, and .38 special from David Gillespie and staged the theft to look like a break-in. The million-dollar question, though, is how is this incident connected to the murder of Tito Valdez? And what could possibly be Ray Parker's motive?
Is there any updates on the Valdez case?
Yeah, ballistics says that slug they pulled out of Valdez matched it back to Parker's gun.
Great. Have you found any connections between them?
Nothing yet, but I've got my CIs working on it right now.
We still have some ghosts in this thing. We're still not exactly sure why he did this.
Hey, as a matter of fact, that's one of my guys now. You feel like taking a trip? This guy's solid.
Yeah, let's go.
A few minutes later, Kenda and Anderson arrive at the back of the strip mall, not far from the Stratton Meadows neighborhood.
Law enforcement have for years used confidential informants, we refer to them as CIs, to solicit information without disclosing who these people are.
Hey, thanks for getting back with me.
Yeah, well, I like Tito. It's a shame he died for nothing.
So what's up? What do we know?
You know Ron Castro, right? Word on the street is this is all his fault.
He's saying Ron Castro, Tito Valdez's good friend, is mixed up in all of this. He conveniently forgot to say that the last time we spoke. Well, my. We've arrested a man named Ray Parker for the murder of Tito Valdez, but we've been unable to determine a motive or how they were connected until now. A CI has informed us that Tito Valdez's good friend, Ron Castro, may be the missing link.
Ron Castro? What's he got to do with this?
He's been selling drugs.
Was Tito helping him?
That's the thing. He didn't have anything to do with the drugs. He was just Ron's friend.
All right. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
According to the informant, the trouble started a few days earlier when Tito was driving Ron home.
Tito was kind of a go-along guy. He went along with the Los Meadows Barrios, and that got him in some level of jam more than once.
You mind making a quick stop?
Yeah, man. What you got going on?
Nothing. Just gotta take care of something quick.
Ron sells cocaine that's been doctored to the max. There's some cocaine in it, but very little. So Castro's making a living selling bunk junk on the street.
Pull up to that car right there.
Right there?
Yeah, that's good.
This won't take long.
Hurry up, man.
The informant explains that although Ray Parker hadn't been in town long, he'd quickly become one of Ron Castro's regular customers.
What's up, my man? What can I do for you?
Is he cool?
Yeah, don't worry about him.
You got stuff?
Yeah. All right, man.
And he sells some to Ray Parker, and when he made that sale, Tito Valdez was with Castro. He was not an active participant in the sale, but he was with them.
Hurry up, let's go.
Hey, look. I don't want to be around when you do this again.
Let's go.
I'm being serious.
It won't happen again. Let's go. Come on.
It was probably dangerous for all of us to know Ron because the guy didn't care what he took from anybody.
Detectives surmise that while Tito drove Ron home, Ray Parker tested out the product.
He's a short-order cook in a restaurant. He doesn't have a lot of money. He recently left his wife, and he's using drugs to soothe his pain of his troubled life.
Oh! Damn, that burns.
He spends his hard-earned money for what he believes is cocaine, and it turns out it isn't.
Damn it.
Then he is furious. He wants to take revenge.
And he knew his roommate David had a gun.
In this case, we have a guy, Mr. Parker, who is a criminal. He does what he wants. He wants a gun, he takes it. He wants that money, he takes that. He takes the cassette tapes as well.
Investigators suspect that after robbing his roommate, Ray Parker cruised around Stratton Meadows looking for Ron and Tito and recognized Tito's truck from the drug deal.
It was almost like it was casing the neighborhood. So he was waiting for him when he walked outside.
And it just so happened that Tito had forgotten his tools for a job the next day and had to run out and get them.
There you are, you bastard.
Hey, man. Hey, do I know you?
This was really a senseless murder. It didn't have to happen.
And it's an absolute waste of a life over something he didn't even do.
He took my friend, man, you know. He took Tito's from me, man, you know. It hurt me bad, man.
Ray Parker pled guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison.
It's definitely a sad story. Tito leaves behind a wife, some kids that will never know him, people who loved him.
Tito Valdez had some problems, yes. He was born into a tough situation that he tried to make the best of. And the loss of his life basically came down to being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
It begins with a sound that should not exist at dawn in New York City, a phone ringing too long in a quiet apartment, unanswered, vibrating against a wooden table while the city outside exhales steam from manholes and the last streetlights flicker like tired witnesses, because by the time anyone forces that door open, the story has already decided it will never be simple, never clean, never finished. The year is 1992. The neighborhood is the kind people describe as ordinary, which is often code for places no one looks too closely at, places where routines are trusted more than facts. Inside the apartment, the air is stale, untouched, a coffee cup left half full, a coat draped over a chair as if its owner planned to be back in minutes. But the owner never returned. And just like that, a life slips into the category investigators hate most: missing, unexplained, unresolved. Her name will appear in the papers for a week, maybe two. A small photo, grainy, black and white. A caption that says last seen, followed by a date that will soon become heavier than anyone expects. Friends describe her as quiet, dependable, the kind of person who didn't disappear. Family members insist there is no reason, no history, no warning. The police note the lack of forced entry, the absence of blood, the normalcy of the scene that feels wrong precisely because it is normal. This is how cold cases are born. Not with screams, but with silence. Outside, the city moves on fast. Taxis honk. Radios blare headlines about politics, crime, recession. Somewhere downtown, another murder demands attention, another crime scene floods the system. Resources are finite. Leads dry up quickly. A neighbor remembers hearing footsteps on the stairs, or maybe it was the TV. A shop owner thinks he saw her that morning, or maybe it was the day before. Witness statements blur. Timelines stretch, then snap. Within weeks, the investigation slows. Within months, it stalls. By the end of the year, the file is thick with paper and thin on answers. The detectives assigned to the case don't call it hopeless, not out loud, but they feel it. No body. No suspect. No clear motive. Just a woman who left everything behind as if erased mid-sentence. They knock on doors. They interview coworkers who say she was normal, always normal. They check bank records, phone logs, subway cards. Nothing unusual. No sudden withdrawals. No frantic calls. No signs of escape. It's as if she walked into the city and the city swallowed her whole. Then come the theories. Voluntary disappearance. Stranger abduction. Secret lover. Wrong place, wrong time. Each theory sparks a brief flare of urgency, then dies. The case slips into a drawer, literally and figuratively. Another unsolved file in New York, another statistic in a city that measures tragedy by volume. The family keeps asking questions. The answers don't change. We don't know. We're still looking. We'll call if there's anything new. There never is. Years pass. The neighborhood changes. Stores close. New buildings rise. People who once knew her move away or forget details that once felt sharp. The missing woman becomes a story told in past tense, then not told at all. But cold cases don't disappear. They wait. They sit quietly, gathering dust, aging badly, holding secrets no one realizes they're keeping. By the late 90s, the case is officially labeled a cold case. The words sound clinical, but they carry weight. Cold means untouched. Cold means unanswered. Cold means the trail has gone dark. For the family, cold means something else entirely. It means birthdays without closure. Holidays with an empty chair. It means living in a permanent state of unfinished grief, suspended between hope and acceptance, unable to fully let go because there is nothing to let go of. Detectives rotate out. New officers skim the file, shake their heads, move on. Occasionally, a tip comes in. A psychic. An anonymous caller. A rumor overheard in a bar. Each one leads nowhere. Each one reopens the wound just enough to hurt again. The case remains frozen in 1992, preserved in paper and memory, untouched by time but eroded by it. And then, quietly, something changes. Not in 1992. Not in 1995. Not even in 2002. It changes years later, when technology catches up to questions the past couldn't answer. Databases grow. Old evidence gets new attention. Cold cases across the country begin to thaw, one by one, as DNA, data, and persistence do what time alone could not. Files are reopened. Names long forgotten are spoken again in interview rooms. This case is pulled from the archive not because of a dramatic confession or a sensational tip, but because someone notices something small. A detail overlooked. A relationship assumed to be simple. A family dynamic no one questioned because it seemed too ordinary to matter. Investigators start from the beginning, not chasing new theories, but interrogating old assumptions. They reread statements. They listen to taped interviews with fresh ears. They notice the pauses, the hesitations, the answers that were technically true but emotionally empty. The family is contacted again. Decades have passed. Voices sound older, heavier. Memories are less certain, but emotions remain raw. Investigators ask questions they didn't ask before. Not because they were incompetent back then, but because the questions didn't seem relevant. Now, they do. Family members exchange looks. Some answers come too quickly. Others come wrapped in anger, defensiveness, fatigue. The past, long buried, starts to shift. What investigators begin to sense is not a stranger lurking in the shadows, not a random act of violence, but something closer, quieter, more unsettling. A secret kept not out of malice, but out of fear. A truth buried not to hurt someone else, but to survive. The kind of secret families convince themselves is harmless as long as no one speaks it aloud. Paperwork leads to conversations. Conversations lead to contradictions. Timelines don't align the way they should. A phone call remembered differently. A visit that was never mentioned. A person who insists they were elsewhere, but cannot prove it. These are not smoking guns. They are whispers. But cold cases are solved on whispers as often as they are on screams. As investigators dig deeper, they realize the case was never really about disappearance. It was about what came before it. about relationships strained beneath the surface, about obligations mistaken for love, about choices made quietly, behind closed doors, that ripple outward in ways no one anticipates. The missing woman's life, once summarized in a paragraph, expands into something more complicated, more human, more tragic. The community, largely unaware that the case has been reopened, continues its daily rhythm. But inside police offices and private living rooms, the past is being reconstructed piece by piece. Each revelation adds weight. Each answer raises another question. The idea that this was a random tragedy begins to collapse under scrutiny. What replaces it is harder to face. Because if this disappearance was not random, if it was not the act of a stranger, then the danger was never outside. It was already inside the circle of trust. Inside the family dinners. Inside the phone calls that went unanswered. Inside the silence everyone agreed to keep. By the time investigators start to believe they understand what happened, they are no longer sure what justice would even look like. Years have passed. People have aged. Some have died. Evidence is incomplete. The law moves slower than memory, and memory is unreliable at best. The case is inching toward something that resembles resolution, but resolution does not mean relief. In New York, cold cases rarely end with clean conclusions. They end with compromises. With truths that arrive too late. With answers that cost more than anyone is prepared to pay. And as this investigation pushes forward, one thing becomes increasingly clear: whatever happened in 1992 did not end that year. It echoed forward, shaping lives, relationships, and silences for decades. The file is no longer cold. But it is not at peace. And as investigators prepare to confront the family with what they believe they've uncovered, the question lingers in the air, heavy and unavoidable. When the truth finally surfaces, will it bring closure, or will it simply replace one mystery with another, darker one, leaving everyone to wonder whether some secrets, once buried, were never meant to be found? The investigators don't announce progress. They never do with cases like this. Progress invites scrutiny, and scrutiny invites mistakes. Instead, they work quietly, tracing old lines with new pressure, reopening conversations that were never meant to be reopened. In a city like New York, the past doesn't stay past for long once someone starts asking the wrong questions. Records are pulled. Names resurface. A pattern begins to emerge, not dramatic, not obvious, but persistent enough to refuse dismissal. They start with the family because that's where the file has always pointed without quite daring to accuse. Parents. Siblings. Extended relatives. Every interview from 1992 is laid out side by side, sentences compared, tone weighed. Back then, the answers sounded cooperative. Now, they sound rehearsed. Not identical, but aligned, as if everyone agreed on the shape of the story even if the details blurred. Investigators notice what isn't said as much as what is. Emotional gaps. Over-explained alibis. A shared insistence that nothing was wrong, even when subtle signs suggest otherwise. The missing woman had been living between two worlds in the months before she vanished. Outwardly stable. Privately strained. Financial records hint at quiet stress. Not desperation, but pressure. Phone logs show frequent calls to home, far more than usual, often late at night. Conversations that ended abruptly. No records of what was said, only the duration, sometimes stretching past midnight, sometimes cut short after a few minutes. Investigators wonder what kind of conversations pull an adult woman back into her childhood orbit so often, so urgently. They talk to former coworkers again. People who once shrugged and said she seemed fine now hesitate. Fine, they admit, but distracted. Tired. On edge. Someone remembers an argument overheard near the office payphones. Someone else recalls her asking about short-term leave, about disappearing for a while, phrased like a joke but delivered without humor. None of it was alarming enough to report in 1992. All of it feels heavier now. Attention turns to a specific weekend, one that barely registered in the original investigation. A family gathering. A birthday. A small celebration that produced no photos, no home videos, no souvenirs beyond memory. According to statements, she attended, stayed briefly, left early. No one remembered exactly when. No one remembered exactly why. Investigators circle that gap. Time, vague and slippery, is where cold cases hide their answers. When detectives re-interview family members about that weekend, the atmosphere shifts. Voices tighten. Stories diverge. One relative insists she never showed up. Another says she did, but barely spoke. A third remembers a heated discussion behind closed doors, though they can't recall the subject. These aren't dramatic contradictions. They're worse. They're small. Mundane. The kind of inconsistencies that suggest not lies, but coordination strained by time. The investigators don't accuse. They ask the same questions repeatedly, weeks apart, phrased differently. They watch reactions. They note who grows defensive and who grows quiet. Silence becomes its own kind of testimony. In one interview, a family member pauses too long before answering a question about the last phone call they shared. The pause is recorded, replayed, stretched. It doesn't prove anything. But it doesn't disappear either. Meanwhile, the physical evidence, what little exists, is re-examined. Items from the apartment are tested again. Fibers. Hair. Dust. The technology is better now, but the results are still thin. No clear signs of violence. No foreign DNA. The absence that once suggested a clean disappearance now feels deliberate. If something happened, it didn't happen there. Or it happened in a way designed to leave nothing behind. Investigators broaden their scope. They look at family vehicles registered at the time. Repair records. Mileage logs. Old parking tickets. Anything that suggests movement. One car stands out. Not because of evidence, but because of a gap. A period when the car's location can't be firmly placed. A routine oil change delayed by weeks. A receipt missing. It's circumstantial. It's fragile. But cold cases are built on fragile things. They map the city as it was in 1992. Construction sites. Abandoned lots. Waterfront access points long since redeveloped. Places where something could be hidden and never found. The city has erased many of its own scars. What was once empty land is now luxury housing. What was once accessible water is now fenced off. If a body was ever there, it may be unreachable now, sealed beneath concrete and progress. As the investigation tightens, the emotional cost rises. Family members sense the shift. Questions feel sharper. The tone less forgiving. Old wounds reopen. Accusations are implied without being spoken. Some relatives stop answering calls. Others demand lawyers. One breaks down during an interview, not in anger, but exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. That breakdown changes everything. It doesn't include a confession. It doesn't include details. It includes one sentence investigators can't ignore. A sentence about protecting someone. About doing what felt necessary at the time. The words are vague, immediately walk back, but they hang in the air long after the interview ends. Protecting who? From what? From whom? Investigators replay the audio again and again, dissecting tone, context, intent. They begin to suspect the case sits in a moral gray zone the law isn't designed to handle cleanly. Not a predator stalking a victim. Not a sudden act of rage. Something slower. Something born of obligation, fear, and a belief that silence was the lesser evil. A family decision, not unanimous, but enforced by circumstance. The missing woman's life is recontextualized. Her choices. Her hesitations. Her frequent contact with home. What once looked like closeness now looks like entanglement. Investigators theorize that she may have been trapped by a secret she didn't create but was expected to carry. A secret that threatened to surface. A secret that, once spoken, would have shattered more than one life. In this version of events, her disappearance is not an escape. It's an erasure. Not violent in the traditional sense, but final all the same. The absence of evidence becomes evidence of planning. Of people who knew her habits. Her trust. Her willingness to comply if convinced it was for the greater good. As the theory solidifies, so does the unease. Because proving this kind of crime is almost impossible decades later. Memories have faded. Physical proof is gone. Motives are subjective. The truth, if it exists, lives inside people who have spent years convincing themselves they did the right thing. The law demands clarity. This case offers none. Still, investigators push forward. They owe her that. They owe the version of her frozen in that black and white photo. They prepare to confront the family not with accusations, but with consequences. With the reality that silence, no matter how well-intentioned, has a cost. That protecting one person may have destroyed another. The city outside remains indifferent. It always is. But inside this investigation, the pressure builds toward an inevitable collision. A moment when someone will have to choose between preserving the story they've lived with for decades and facing a truth that will rewrite everything. And as that moment approaches, one question dominates every conversation, every late-night review of files and recordings. If this cold case is truly solved, if investigators are right about what happened in 1992, then the real shock won't be the crime itself. It will be the realization that everyone involved knew, in some way, all along, and chose silence instead. The decision to push harder is not unanimous. Cold cases have a way of dividing even seasoned investigators, splitting them between those who believe truth is still reachable and those who suspect it has decomposed beyond usefulness. But this team has crossed an invisible threshold. Too many inconsistencies. Too many emotional fractures. Too many signs that the story everyone agreed on in 1992 was less a memory than a pact. They begin reconstructing the days before the disappearance hour by hour, not relying on recollection, but on friction points. Utility usage in the apartment spikes one evening, then drops sharply. A voicemail left for a coworker is never returned. A subway entry is logged, but no corresponding exit. Small data points, insignificant alone, unsettling together. The city's systems, indifferent and mechanical, have preserved traces of a woman no one could. Investigators return to the apartment building, now renovated, cleaner, brighter, almost hostile to the idea that something went wrong there. New tenants know nothing. Old ones are harder to find. One former resident remembers her vaguely, a polite nod in the hallway, nothing more. Another recalls a raised voice on the stairs late one night, but shrugs it off, unsure whether the memory belongs to this building or another. Time corrupts memory like water corrodes metal. Attention shifts back to the family, but now the questions are sharper, less forgiving of ambiguity. Detectives ask about long-standing tensions, about money, about obligations that never made it into official statements. They ask about a relative whose name appears frequently in phone records but rarely in interviews. Someone who always seemed present, but never central. The kind of person families orbit without quite acknowledging. That name triggers reactions. A tightening of jaws. A sudden need to check watches. A request to pause the interview. One family member laughs nervously and says it's ridiculous. Another says nothing at all. Silence, again, does more talking than words ever could. Investigators note it carefully. They begin to suspect the family secret is not a single event, but a condition. Something ongoing. Something normalized. A situation everyone learned to manage quietly. The missing woman may not have been the center of it, but she may have been the pressure point. The one least willing to keep carrying it. The one whose disappearance made everything easier for those left behind, whether they admit it or not. This theory reframes everything. Her frequent calls home become negotiations. Her distracted demeanor becomes fatigue from maintaining appearances. Her talk of leaving, of taking time away, becomes a threat not of escape, but of exposure. If she left on her own terms, she might talk. If she talked, the secret would collapse. Investigators tread carefully here. Accusing a family of eliminating one of their own is a line that cannot be crossed lightly. They look for external confirmation. Medical records. Social services. Anything that hints at a hidden burden. They find fragments. Nothing conclusive. Enough to unsettle. Enough to suggest that the family's private reality was more complicated than the public one. One detective focuses on a single phrase repeated across multiple interviews, years apart. We thought it was handled. Handled how? By whom? When pressed, the answers slide sideways. It was dealt with. It was under control. It wasn't going to be a problem anymore. The language is vague, but the confidence behind it is not. These are not people guessing. These are people remembering. The investigation begins to feel less like a search for a perpetrator and more like an excavation of consent. Who agreed to what? Who knew enough to stay quiet? Who benefited most from the disappearance? The law is ill-equipped for this kind of moral labyrinth. There are crimes it can name and crimes it cannot. This one hovers uncomfortably between them. As pressure mounts, cracks widen. One family member agrees to a follow-up interview, alone this time. Without the others. Without the shared script. The tone shifts immediately. There is anger now. Regret. A bitterness that has had decades to ferment. The relative speaks of manipulation. Of being convinced that silence was necessary. Of being told that involving authorities would destroy lives. The missing woman's life is mentioned only briefly, almost as an afterthought, and that omission is telling. Investigators listen without interrupting. They let the anger spill. Somewhere in the flood of grievances, a detail emerges that wasn't in the file before. A late-night drive. A stop that made no sense at the time. An instruction not to ask questions. The relative insists they didn't know what was happening, only that it felt wrong. They say they've lived with that feeling ever since. That interview doesn't solve the case. It complicates it. It suggests a chain of involvement where no one person holds the entire truth. Each participant knows just enough to justify their own silence. Responsibility is distributed thinly, making it harder to grasp, harder to prosecute. Investigators map these partial truths against each other. Overlaps appear. So do gaps. The late-night drive matches the window when the missing woman's phone goes silent. The stop aligns with an area that, in 1992, was accessible, isolated, forgettable. Today, it's unrecognizable. The city has paved over the past with impressive efficiency. The question of a body resurfaces, unavoidable and unresolved. Without remains, the case remains vulnerable. Defense attorneys thrive on absence. No body, no crime. Investigators know this. They also know that bodies are not the only proof of death. Sometimes, disappearance itself, combined with context, is enough. Sometimes. The family begins to fracture under the weight of scrutiny. Old alliances shift. Accusations surface quietly, and whispers pass through lawyers and intermediaries. Someone leaks information to a reporter. A brief article appears, careful but suggestive, hinting that a long-dormant cold case may soon be reclassified. The community, long detached, stirs uneasily. For the family, the fear is no longer about being blamed. It's about being exposed. About the story they've lived with becoming public, stripped of nuance, flattened into headlines. About being judged not just for what they may have done, but for what they allowed to happen. Investigators feel the clock ticking. Not a legal deadline, but a human one. Witnesses are aging. Memories are fading. Opportunities are closing. They consider their options. Push for charges with what they have, risking acquittal. Or continue building, hoping for something more solid, something undeniable? The missing woman remains at the center of it all, paradoxically absent and omnipresent. Her voice is gone, but her choices echo through every interview, every argument, every sleepless night spent poring over files. She is no longer just a victim. She is a catalyst. The one person whose refusal, however quiet, forced everything into motion. As the investigation edges closer to a public reckoning, one unsettling realization takes hold among the detectives. If the family secret is exposed, if the truth of what happened in 1992 becomes official, it will not offer the clean satisfaction people expect from solved cases. There will be no singular villain. No dramatic arrest that restores balance. There will only be a collection of ordinary people, bound by fear and loyalty, who made a series of choices that felt survivable in the moment and monstrous in hindsight. And there will be a city forced to confront the idea that some disappearances are not accidents, not crimes of passion, but decisions made quietly, collaboratively, and with devastating permanence. The file sits open on the table, no longer cold, not yet closed. Outside, New York hums, oblivious. Inside, the past presses forward, demanding recognition. And as investigators prepare for the next step, they understand that whatever comes next will not just solve a case. It will unravel a family and expose the fragile line between protection and destruction that has kept the truth buried for far too long. By the time prosecutors are briefed, the room feels heavier than it should. Not with certainty, but with implication. They listen as investigators lay out timelines that don't quite line up, interviews that echo each other too closely, silences that feel engineered rather than accidental. No single piece of evidence commands the room. Instead, it's the accumulation that unsettles. The sense that something coherent is hiding just beneath the surface, refusing to fully reveal itself. The prosecutors ask the question everyone has been avoiding. What exactly are we charging here? Murder without a body is a hard sell. Conspiracy requires clarity of agreement. Obstruction depends on proving intent. The law demands edges. This case offers fog. Investigators admit as much. But they also insist that fog does not mean emptiness. It means concealment. They return to the family again, this time with subpoenas instead of requests. Bank records stretch back decades. Old insurance policies resurface. A life insurance policy taken out years before the disappearance, modest but notable, lists a beneficiary who insists it meant nothing, something every adult had, something forgotten. Investigators note the timing. The payments continued for a while after she vanished. Then they stopped. No claim was ever filed. Another detail that doesn't prove anything and yet refuses to be ignored. They look into medical histories. Confidential files are sealed tight, but patterns emerge through indirect sources. Prescriptions filled regularly, then abruptly ended. Appointments scheduled, then canceled indefinitely. The missing woman appears to have been managing something private, something that required routine and discretion. Whether it was her burden or someone else's is unclear. What is clear is that it placed her in a position of responsibility she did not choose. This reframes the family secret yet again. Investigators consider the possibility that her disappearance was rationalized as necessary. That someone convinced themselves it was kinder to erase her than to let her speak. That compassion and cruelty blurred until they were indistinguishable. This is not the language of killers as people imagine them. It is the language of people who believe they are preventing a greater harm. A former family friend is located after months of searching. They live out of state now, far from New York, far from the memories they never quite escaped. When contacted, they hesitate, then agree to talk. Their recollection is imperfect, but one moment stands out with unnatural clarity. A conversation shortly before the disappearance. The missing woman sounded frightened, not of someone outside the family, but of what would happen if she didn't keep her word. The friend remembers urging her to go to the police. She laughed, a brittle sound, and said it wasn't that simple. That phrase echoes through the investigation. Not that simple. Investigators hear it again and again, in different voices, across different interviews. It becomes a kind of refrain, a justification polished smooth by repetition. Nothing was simple. Everything was complicated. And so nothing was done. The timeline tightens. The weekend gathering looms larger. Investigators reconstructed using indirect proof. Grocery receipts. A parking ticket. A voicemail timestamped late at night. The missing woman was alive later than originally thought. She spoke to someone after she was supposedly last seen. That someone never mentioned the call. When confronted, they claim they forgot. Investigators don't believe them. Forgetting is plausible. Selective forgetting is not. The theory now suggests a confrontation. Not violent in the traditional sense. Emotional. Desperate. A conversation that escalated beyond intention. The missing woman may have been pressured to comply with a plan framed as temporary, necessary, reversible. She may have believed she was doing the right thing by agreeing. Or she may have realized too late that agreeing meant vanishing. What happens next is the hardest part to reconstruct. There are gaps no amount of questioning can fill. Investigators suspect transportation, a location chosen for obscurity, and a final act that left no witnesses. Whether she resisted, whether she consented, whether she understood the permanence of what was happening may never be known. The absence of physical evidence keeps these questions suspended, unanswerable. As the case edges closer to public exposure, the family's internal dynamics deteriorate. Lawyers replace conversations. Statements are vetted. Everyone becomes careful with words, even among themselves. The unity that once sustained the silence fractures under pressure. Blame begins to circulate quietly. Someone says they were misled. Someone else says they were coerced. Responsibility dissolves into a series of conditional statements, each one pushing guilt onto someone else. Investigators sense an opportunity. They focus on the weakest link, the person whose involvement appears reluctant rather than decisive. They present the evidence they have, carefully, methodically. They talk about consequences. Not just legal ones, but moral ones. About the weight of carrying this alone. About the possibility, however slim, of partial redemption through truth. The response is not immediate. Days pass. Weeks. Then a call comes in late one evening. The voice on the other end sounds older than it should, worn thin by years of restraint. They agree to meet, but only off the record at first. No recorders. No notes. Just a conversation. What they say doesn't solve the case. But it shatters the illusion that the family acted as a unified front. They describe confusion. Fear. A moment where they believed the missing woman would come back, that the arrangement was temporary. When it became clear she wouldn't, no one knew how to undo what had been set in motion. Silence hardened into policy. Denial into survival. Investigators leave that meeting knowing two things. First, that the truth is closer than it has ever been. Second, that the truth is uglier and more banal than anyone expected. There was no mastermind. No singular villain. Just a series of decisions made under pressure, each one narrowing the path back to honesty. The prosecutors remain cautious. Without remains, without a confession that includes specifics, the case is fragile. But public pressure is mounting. The leaked article has sparked interest. True crime forums begin dissecting the story. Armchair detectives speculate wildly. Some get close. Others veer into fantasy. The family becomes a subject of scrutiny, their past behavior reinterpreted through suspicion. For the investigators, the noise is a distraction. They focus on the core question that has haunted the case from the beginning. Why did no one stop it? Why did no one speak up? The answers they've found are uncomfortable because they are relatable. Loyalty. Fear. Love twisted into obligation. The belief that keeping quiet was an act of kindness. As the possibility of charges becomes real, the family faces a reckoning they postponed for decades. Old justifications crumble under the weight of consequences. Some express remorse privately, never publicly. Others cling to denial, insisting that reopening the case does more harm than good. The missing woman, they argue, has been gone too long. Let the past stay buried. But the past has a way of resurfacing, especially when it was never truly laid to rest. Investigators prepare their final push, knowing it may be their last chance to extract something concrete from a story built on absence. They understand that even if the case is declared solved, even if the headline reads the way people want it to read, resolution will be incomplete. Because solving this cold case will not restore what was lost. It will not untangle decades of guilt and silence. It will only illuminate a moment in 1992 when a family chose secrecy over truth, and a woman disappeared into that choice, leaving behind a void that no explanation can ever fully fill. The pressure reaches a point where silence is no longer neutral. It becomes an act. Prosecutors authorize a limited public statement, carefully worded, confirming that the 1992 disappearance is now the subject of an active investigation and that authorities believe they are close to determining what happened. No names are mentioned. No accusations are made. But the message is clear enough. The case is no longer dormant. Anyone still holding onto the truth is running out of places to hide it. The reaction is immediate. Reporters descend. Old neighbors are tracked down. Former co-workers are asked to remember things they buried decades ago. The family's privacy evaporates overnight. Every gesture, every past quote, every inconsistency is magnified. For some family members, the attention feels like punishment. For others, it feels like inevitability. What was contained for so long has finally broken its seal. Investigators take advantage of the momentum. They re-interview witnesses who previously declined to talk. Some still refuse. Others, now unshielded by the family's collective silence, are more willing. A distant relative admits they were told, years ago, not to ask questions. A friend confesses they suspected something was wrong but didn't want to interfere. These statements don't add new facts. They add texture. They show how far the silence extended, how many people sensed the truth without daring to name it. One detail begins to crystallize. The missing woman was not removed suddenly. She was gradually isolated. Responsibilities increased. Options narrowed. The family secret, whatever its precise nature, demanded constant management. She was reliable. Compliant. The kind of person who could be trusted to do what was asked, even when it hurt. That reliability may have sealed her fate. Investigators believe the final decision was framed as temporary. A break. A pause. Something that could be undone once tensions cooled. She may have been told to leave town, to stay quiet, to disappear for a while. Whether she agreed willingly or under pressure is impossible to determine. What matters is that the people involved believed they could control the outcome. They believed she would return. Or that if she didn't, they could live with that. The distinction matters legally, but emotionally it collapses. A temporary solution becomes permanent when no one intervenes. When days pass, then weeks, then years, and silence hardens into fact. The family's greatest mistake may not have been the initial act, but the decision to maintain it. Each year that passed without action deepened the crime, transforming hesitation into complicity. Prosecutors wrestle with strategy. They consider offering immunity to one participant in exchange for testimony. It's risky. It could fracture the case beyond repair. But without a witness willing to speak fully, the story remains incomplete. They identify the most likely candidate, the one whose involvement appears minimal, whose guilt seems rooted more in omission than commission. The one already showing cracks. An offer is made quietly. Conditional. Carefully scoped. It promises protection from certain charges, not absolution. In return, they want specifics. Dates. Locations. Names. Not feelings or justifications. Facts. The response is delayed. Days stretch. Investigators wait, aware that pressure cuts both ways. Too much, and the witness shuts down. Too little, and the opportunity slips away. While they wait, they revisit the physical geography one last time. Old maps are overlaid with new ones. They focus on the area identified in earlier interviews, the place connected to the late-night drive. In 1992, it was desolate. Industrial. Easy to access without being seen. Today, it's been transformed. Construction crews have reshaped the land. Layers of earth have been moved, compacted, sealed. Excavation would be expensive, disruptive, and likely inconclusive. Even if something is there, reaching it may be impossible. This reality forces a grim acceptance. The case may be solved without remains. Closure, if it comes, will be intellectual, not physical. The family will never have a body to bury. The city will never have a crime scene to point to. The truth will exist mostly in testimony and inference, fragile and contested. The call finally comes. The potential witness agrees to a formal interview, on the record. Lawyers are present. So are prosecutors. The room is small, windowless, designed to remove distractions. The witness looks older than their years, shoulders curved inward, as if bracing for impact. When they speak, it's halting at first, then steadier, as if something long restrained has found a path out. They confirm what investigators suspected. The plan was meant to be temporary. The missing woman was supposed to leave, to stay with someone outside the city, to keep quiet until the situation stabilized. The witness insists they believed this. That everyone believed this. They describe confusion when days passed without contact. Alarm when weeks followed. But by then, the story had been set. Admitting uncertainty would have unraveled everything. So they stayed silent. They stopped short of admitting intent to harm. They emphasized lack of control, lack of knowledge. Prosecutors pressed gently, then harder. Where was she taken? Who decided? Who knew it would be permanent? The answers are incomplete, but they point inward, toward the family. Toward decisions made collectively, without a single author. The interview lasts hours. When it ends, no one feels relief. There is confirmation, but not clarity. Enough to support a narrative. Not enough to eliminate doubt. Prosecutors step out to confer. Investigators sit in silence, absorbing the weight of what has been said. Decades of speculation have narrowed into a few hours of testimony, and still, the center remains hollow. News of the interview leaks within days. Headlines explode. The phrase family secret dominates coverage, stripped of nuance, inflated by conjecture. The public demands accountability. Some call for arrests. Others argue it's too late, that reopening old wounds serves no one. The family retreats further, some issuing statements through attorneys, others disappearing from view entirely. For the missing woman's memory, the attention is double-edged. Her name is spoken again, finally, but often as an object of scandal rather than a person. Her life is reduced to its ending. Investigators try to push back against this, reminding reporters that she was more than a victim, more than a problem to be managed. But the media machine has little patience for complexity. As prosecutors prepare to make a decision, they confront the uncomfortable truth at the heart of the case. Justice, as traditionally defined, may be unattainable. The law can punish actions, but it struggles with collective silence. It can name crimes, but it cannot easily name moral failure. Whatever charges are filed will feel insufficient to some and excessive to others. The family, fractured and exposed, faces its own reckoning. Relationships strain under the weight of blame and regret. Old arguments resurface with new intensity. Some members express remorse openly now, too late to matter legally, but necessary for their own survival. Others double down on denial, insisting the past cannot be judged by present standards. Through it all, the missing woman remains absent, her voice inferred but never heard. Investigators wonder what she would think of this moment, of the attention, of the partial truths finally emerging. Would she feel vindicated? Betrayed? Or simply tired, watching the world struggle to understand a decision she never wanted to make? As the case approaches its final phase, one reality becomes unavoidable. Solving this cold case will not end the story. It will only fix it in a particular shape, one version among many. The truth, such as it is, will always be incomplete, missing the one perspective that mattered most. And in that absence, the city is left with a conclusion that feels more like an echo. A recognition that in 1992, something irreversible happened, not in a moment of chaos, but in a series of calm, rationalized choices. Choices that seemed survivable at the time. Choices that, taken together, erased a woman from the city she called home, and left behind a silence that no amount of investigation can ever fully break. The prosecutors take longer than anyone expects. Days stretch into weeks, and the delay fuels speculation that something has gone wrong, that the case is collapsing under its own ambiguity. But inside the office, the hesitation isn't weakness. It's gravity. Every possible charge is weighed against the same problem, proof that convinces 12 strangers beyond a reasonable doubt. The testimony is compelling, but it is also careful, shaped by lawyers and memory and fear. It gestures toward truth without fully grasping it. They draft scenarios. In one, conspiracy charges move forward, framing the disappearance as a coordinated effort to remove a perceived threat. In another, obstruction and false statements form the backbone, punishing the silence rather than the act itself. Each option carries risk. Push too hard, and the case collapses in court. Push too softly, and it feels like a betrayal of the woman who vanished. Investigators sense momentum slipping. Witnesses who were willing to talk begin to retreat again, alarmed by media attention and the prospect of public testimony. The family's lawyers grow more aggressive, challenging timelines, questioning motives, suggesting that investigators are constructing a story to satisfy public appetite rather than evidence. It's a familiar tactic, and it works. Doubt creeps back in, quiet but persistent. To counter it, investigators return to the witness whose testimony cracked the case open. They ask for more. Not more emotion, but more specificity. They ask about routes taken that night. About landmarks. About smells, sounds, anything sensory that might anchor memory to place. The witness struggles, frustrated by their own uncertainty. Decades have softened edges. Streets have changed names. Buildings are gone. The city has overwritten the past. Still, fragments emerge. A bridge crossed. A turn taken too early. A stretch of road that felt endless. Investigators plot these fragments on old maps, triangulating possibilities. One location stands out again, not because it's certain, but because it fits too well. It sits at the intersection of convenience and obscurity. It would have been accessible in 1992. It would have been easy to rationalize. It would have been easy to forget. They request permission to search the area using modern techniques. Ground-penetrating radar. Soil analysis. The request triggers legal resistance. Property owners object. The city hesitates. The cost is high. The likelihood of success is uncertain. Prosecutors weigh the optics. Authorizing a search that yields nothing could undermine the entire case. But not searching feels like surrender. In the end, a limited search is approved. Quiet. Unannounced. Conducted at dawn to minimize attention. Investigators stand at the perimeter, watching machines roll across land that has been reshaped countless times since 1992. Each pass of the radar sends a pulse into the ground, searching for disturbances that might signal human remains. The readings are inconclusive. There are anomalies, but nothing definitive. Soil has been moved too often. Layers overlap. The earth has learned to keep its secrets. The search ends without ceremony. No press conference. No announcement. Just a line added to the file. Area examined. No remains located. It's not a failure, but it feels like one. The absence of a body continues to dominate the case, casting a shadow over every decision. Meanwhile, the family's internal conflict intensifies. One member, previously silent, breaks ranks publicly, issuing a statement that stops just short of accusation. They speak of regret, of carrying guilt, of wishing things had been handled differently. The statement is careful, lawyered, but it cracks the facade of unity that protected the secret for decades. Other family members respond angrily, denying implications, accusing betrayal. The fracture is now visible to everyone. Investigators see an opening. They reapproach individuals who have stayed quiet, emphasizing the shifting dynamics. Silence no longer guarantees protection. In fact, it may now guarantee blame. Some listen. Some don't. One agrees to a proffer session, a limited conversation that could lead to cooperation. It's a calculated gamble. The person knows enough to be dangerous, but not enough to fully illuminate the truth. The session is tense. The witness is defensive, suspicious, keenly aware of the stakes. They confirm pieces of the existing narrative while distancing themselves from its worst implications. Yes, there was a plan. Yes, it involved leaving the city. No, they didn't believe it would be permanent. No, they never saw her again. The answers are consistent, but consistency doesn't equal completeness. Prosecutors push on motive. Why her? Why was she the solution? The witness hesitates, then speaks in generalities. Because she was responsible. Because she wouldn't say no. Because she loved the family. The words land hard. Love, reframed as vulnerability. Responsibility, reframed as leverage. The missing woman's defining traits are recast as liabilities that made her expendable. That realization shifts the tone of the investigation. This is no longer about a single bad decision. It's about a system within a family that rewarded compliance and punished resistance. The disappearance becomes the extreme endpoint of a pattern, not an anomaly. Investigators begin to see the case not as a mystery of violence, but as a study in power exercised quietly, without witnesses. Public opinion begins to polarize. Some see the family as monsters, capable of the unthinkable. Others see them as tragic figures, trapped by circumstances, making impossible choices. The debate is loud, emotional, often cruel. The missing woman's humanity is lost in the noise, reduced to a symbol for arguments about blame and forgiveness. Inside the prosecutor's office, a decision finally takes shape. They will move forward, but narrowly. Charges are prepared against select individuals for conspiracy and obstruction, focusing on actions taken after the disappearance rather than speculating about the exact moment of death. It's not everything investigators hoped for. But it's something the law can sustain. When the charges are announced, the city reacts as expected. Shock. Outrage. Skepticism. Headlines declare the cold case solved, even as the fine print reveals how much remains unknown. The word solved becomes a point of contention, criticized by some, defended by others. For investigators, it feels premature. Solved implies completeness. This case offers none. Arraignments follow. Courtrooms fill with cameras. Defendants appear older, diminished by time and stress. Pleas are entered. Not guilty. Innocent. Misunderstood. Lawyers speak confidently. Families sit in silence, divided by aisles and history. The missing woman's name is spoken formally, repeatedly, as if repetition might conjure her presence. Behind the scenes, negotiations begin. Plea deals are discussed. Reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. The possibility of a fuller account tempts prosecutors, but trust is fragile. Every offer risks being exploited. Every concession risks public backlash. The balance between truth and accountability becomes increasingly delicate. Investigators watch from the margins as the case transitions from inquiry to litigation. Their role diminishes. Control shifts to attorneys and judges and procedural rules. The narrative they painstakingly assembled is now subject to cross-examination, reframed by adversarial logic. Details that felt meaningful are challenged as speculation. Gaps are emphasized. Certainty erodes under scrutiny. Still, something irreversible has happened. The silence is broken. The family secret is no longer confined to whispers and memory. It exists in transcripts, filings, sworn statements. The disappearance has been acknowledged not as an accident, not as a mystery of fate, but as the outcome of human choices. For the investigators, that acknowledgement is both victory and defeat. They have pushed the truth into the light, but the light reveals how much remains obscured. They know the case will never yield a clean ending. No dramatic confession. No recovered remains. No moment where everything clicks into place. As the legal process grinds forward, the city resumes its rhythm. New crimes replace old ones in the headlines. Public attention drifts. But for those involved, time has not resumed. It has split. There's before the charges and after. Before the silence broke and after it could no longer hold. The missing woman remains absent, still unlocated, still undefined by the law's conclusions. But something about her story has changed. She is no longer just someone who vanished. She is someone who was decided upon, weighed, managed, and ultimately removed from the narrative of a family that believed it was protecting itself. That understanding settles heavily over the case as it moves toward its uncertain conclusion. The cold case may be labeled solved, but its core remains unresolved, pulsing beneath legal language and public judgment. A reminder that some truths surface not to heal, but to haunt, and that solving a case does not always mean ending the pain, it sometimes only gives it a name. The courtroom becomes the new arena, but it is an ill-fitting one. Cold cases don't adapt well to fluorescent lights and rigid schedules. They resist the tidy logic of motions and objections. What happened in 1992 lives in memory and inference, not in exhibits that can be passed to a jury. Still, the process advances, indifferent to discomfort. Pretrial hearings strip the story down to its bones. Prosecutors argue that the disappearance was the foreseeable outcome of coordinated actions and sustained deception. Defense attorneys counter with uncertainty, with the absence of a body, with the danger of confusing moral failure with criminal intent. They repeat the same phrase until it dulls the room. Tragic does not mean illegal. Tragic does not mean illegal. The words echo, sharp and hollow. Witnesses are prepped behind closed doors. Some are eager, fueled by a need to finally speak. Others are brittle, frightened of what testimony will cost them. The witness who first broke the silence begins to waver. Public scrutiny has a way of hardening regret into fear. Every statement is dissected online. Every hesitation is labeled a lie. The past they hoped to unburden themselves of now feels heavier than ever. Investigators watch this shift with concern. They know how fragile cooperation can be once the stakes become real. They meet with prosecutors, urging caution, urging patience. Push too hard, and witnesses retreat entirely. Ease off, and the defense will seize the vacuum. It's a narrow path, and the ground is unstable. As jury selection approaches, the city's appetite for the story resurges. Documentaries are announced. Podcasts dissect timelines with clinical obsession. Amateur sleuths map theories across social media, filling gaps with speculation presented as certainty. Some theories are close. Others are grotesquely wrong. All of them erase nuance in favor of drama. The missing woman becomes a character, not a person. Her family, once unified in silence, now fractures publicly. One member refuses to attend hearings. Another sits rigidly in the gallery, eyes fixed forward, refusing to look at the defendants. A third gives a brief interview, speaking of sorrow and confusion, carefully avoiding responsibility. Each appearance adds another layer of interpretation, another version of events competing for dominance. Behind the scenes, plea negotiations intensify. Prosecutors offer reduced charges in exchange for fuller testimony. Defense attorneys advise caution, reminding their clients that memory is fallible and truth is dangerous. Some defendants consider cooperation seriously for the first time. Others reject it outright, convinced that ambiguity is their strongest shield. The lack of remain still looms large. It is the defense's anchor, heavy and reliable. One defendant, previously resolute, begins to unravel. Age has softened their defiance. They speak privately with their attorney about exhaustion, about wanting this to end. They ask what happens if they tell everything they know. The answer is unsatisfying. No guarantees. Only the possibility of leniency and the certainty of consequences. Truth is not a currency the system values consistently. That defendant requests a meeting. Prosecutors agree, cautiously. The conversation is halting, emotional, punctuated by long silences. They speak of fear. Of being young in 1992, overwhelmed, deferring to older voices. They admit they suspected the disappearance would be permanent sooner than they let on. They admit they did nothing. They don't know where the missing woman is. Or they say they don't. The line between ignorance and denial blurs. The prosecutors press for specifics again. Locations. Names. Orders given and followed. The answers are partial, but they corroborate earlier testimony in troubling ways. The narrative tightens, not into clarity, but into coherence. A shape forms where once there was fog. It is still indistinct, but it is undeniably there. This cooperation strengthens the prosecution's hand, but it also introduces new risks. Defense teams prepare to attack credibility, painting cooperators as opportunists willing to say anything to save themselves. They will emphasize inconsistencies, memory gaps, emotional language. They will argue that the state's case rests on stories, not facts. The judge issues rulings that narrow the scope of testimony. Some evidence is excluded. Some language is restricted. The word murder is used sparingly, if at all. The legal framing grows more cautious as trial approaches, as if everyone involved senses how easily this could collapse. The missing woman's absence becomes a presence in the courtroom. Her photograph is admitted into evidence, enlarged, projected for the jury. It is the same image used in early missing person flyers. She looks young, composed, unaware of how her face would be studied decades later. Jurors look at the photograph longer than they look at anything else. It anchors the abstractions, reminding them this is not just an argument about law, but about a person erased. Opening statements loom, and with them, the risk of overreach. Prosecutors rehearse carefully, choosing words that suggest inevitability without asserting certainty they cannot prove. Defense attorneys plan to dismantle that suggestion piece by piece. The trial will not hinge on one dramatic moment. It will hinge on endurance. On which story feels more plausible after weeks of repetition. Outside the courthouse, the public's patience begins to thin. Some accuse prosecutors of dragging the case out. Others accuse them of rushing it. The contradiction is lost in the noise. What people want is closure, a word that circulates freely but means different things to different people. For some, closure means punishment. For others, it means explanation. For a few, it means forgetting. Investigators, now mostly sidelined, grapple with a sense of loss. This case has consumed years of their lives. They know its contours intimately. Watching it filtered through legal strategy feels like watching a familiar landscape flattened into a map. Necessary, perhaps, but painful. They meet occasionally, unofficially, sharing updates, speculating about outcomes. They talk about the missing woman more than anyone else does. About who she was before the case consumed her identity. About whether she would recognize herself in the narrative now attached to her name. They know she will never testify. Her truth will always be inferred, reconstructed, argued over by others. As trial begins, the courtroom settles into a rhythm. Witnesses take the stand. Old memories are summoned, examined, challenged. Some crumble under cross-examination. Others hold, stubborn and imperfect. Jurors listen, taking notes, their expressions carefully neutral. The judge intervenes when tempers flare. The process grinds forward, slow and relentless. The most damaging testimony does not come from any single witness. It comes from accumulation. From hearing the same patterns repeated by different voices. The same rationalizations. The same phrases. It creates an impression that is difficult to dismiss. Not proof of a single act, but proof of a shared mindset. Defense attorneys fight this with equal persistence. They highlight every discrepancy. They remind the jury of the decades that have passed. They question motives. They suggest that grief has been reshaped into accusation, that guilt has been projected where certainty is impossible. They return, again and again, to the absence of remains. No body, no proof of death. No proof of death, no murder. The jury absorbs it all, trapped between empathy and skepticism. Between the desire to believe the worst and the responsibility to doubt it. The missing woman's photograph watches silently from the screen, unchanged, unanswering. As the trial progresses, one truth becomes inescapable. Whatever verdict is reached, it will not resolve the underlying question that has haunted this case from the beginning. Not where she is. Not exactly what happened. But why so many people found it easier to let her disappear than to confront the secret she carried. That question lingers in the courtroom air, unspoken but heavy, shaping every testimony and every objection. It is the question no verdict can fully answer. And as the proceedings inch toward their conclusion, it becomes clear that the cold case has not transformed into a simple story of guilt or innocence. It has become something else entirely. A public reckoning with silence. A demonstration of how ordinary people, under sustained pressure, can convince themselves that doing nothing is the same as doing right. And a reminder that some disappearances are not crimes of chaos, but of consensus, formed quietly, sustained patiently, and revealed only when time itself begins to demand payment. The years don't pass quietly in a city like New York. They grind. They scrape. They leave marks on brick and bone alike. By the time this cold case slips into its second decade, the streets where it began barely resemble themselves, storefronts replaced, faces changed, entire blocks reborn under new names. Yet the absence at the center of the story remains stubbornly intact, like a missing tooth you can't stop touching with your tongue, and every anniversary brings the same ritual back into the light. A small notice in the paper, a brief mention on local radio, another unanswered question carried by the wind. Between buildings that have learned how to forget everything except this. Detectives rotate out, retire, transfer, burn out, and the case file grows heavier without getting any clearer, pages yellowing, evidence bags sealed so long the plastic turns cloudy. And when a new investigator finally cracks it open again, it feels less like starting an investigation and more like opening a time capsule that smells faintly of dust, stale coffee, and disappointment. He reads the same statements, the same contradictions, the same half-truths, and he realizes quickly that the problem isn't a lack of information, it's an excess of it, too many stories stacked on top of each other, each one canceling out the next, each one just plausible enough to keep hope alive and just flimsy enough to collapse under pressure. The victim's name still echoes in the file, typed and retyped across decades of paperwork, a person reduced to a series of facts, height, weight, last known address, last known outfit, last known phone call, and yet everyone who ever knew them insists that the most important details never made it onto the page, the way they laughed too loudly, the way they trusted too easily, the way they seemed distracted in those final weeks, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Friends recall odd behavior, missed appointments, sudden changes in routine, but memory is a slippery witness. And by now every recollection has been replayed so many times it's hard to tell where truth ends and imagination begins. A new tip comes in one winter afternoon, decades late and already apologetic, a voice on the phone trembling with the weight of time, someone who claims they heard something back then, something they didn't understand until years later, something about a fight, a threat, a name whispered in anger, and the detective listens without interrupting, scribbling notes he knows will be added to the pile. Not the solution, but he also knows this is how cold cases move now, not with dramatic Breakthroughs, but with small, human confessions that arrive long after the moment has passed, when fear has softened into regret. The tip leads nowhere concrete, just another circle drawn around the same cluster of familiar names, people who were already questioned, already cleared, already buried under layers of alibis and technicalities. And still, something about it nags, because it points not to a stranger lurking in the dark but to the idea that the danger was close, intimate, woven into the victim's daily life so tightly that it looked like safety. Investigators have learned to fear that possibility more than any shadowy outsider, because it means the truth may have been hiding in plain sight the entire time, protected by normalcy, routine, and the collective unwillingness to imagine that the worst could come from someone known. As the city changes, technology creeps forward, and the case is digitized, scanned into databases, cross-referenced with new tools that promise to see patterns human eyes missed. But the algorithms return the same silence the streets always have. DNA is tested and retested, fibers reanalyzed, but evidence degraded by time refuses to speak clearly, offering only fragments, probabilities, maybes. And the cruel irony is that science has advanced just enough to tease answers without delivering them, like a locked door with the key visible through frosted glass. The family watches all of this from a distance that feels both protective and isolating. They've learned the language of investigators, learned what phrases mean progress and which ones are polite ways of saying nothing has changed. Still active, open investigation, following new leads, words that sound hopeful until you've heard them for 20 years. Some family members cling to the belief that resolution will come suddenly, dramatically, a confession on a deathbed, a forgotten piece of evidence discovered during a renovation, while others quietly prepare themselves for the possibility that closure may never arrive, that the story will simply stop mid-sentence and remain that way forever. Media interest flares and fades like a faulty neon sign. Every few years, a journalist stumbles onto the file, drawn by its unresolved nature, and for a brief moment the case is everywhere again, headlines screaming cold case mystery, new questions emerge, family still waiting, and then the news cycle moves on, pulled by fresher tragedies, leaving behind the same old ache. Each resurgence raises hopes and then dashes them, and some relatives stop answering calls altogether, unwilling to reopen wounds for stories that end exactly where they began. The neighborhood remembers in its own fractured way. Older residents point out corners where they stood when the news broke, bars where people argued late into the night about what really happened, stoops where rumors spread faster than facts. And younger residents listen with a kind of detached curiosity, the case feeling more like urban legend than lived reality. Yet even they feel it sometimes, walking home late, sensing the echo of something unresolved in the air, because cities absorb stories like this and exhale them slowly, shaping the way people move, think, and fear. One retired detective admits years later that the case still visits him in dreams, not as a coherent narrative but as flashes, a door half open, a ringing phone never answered, a face turning away at the wrong moment. And he wakes with the same frustration he felt on the job, the sense that he was always one step behind, always reacting instead of arriving in time. He wonders if he missed something obvious, a detail dismissed too quickly, a witness not pressed hard enough, and this is the quiet torture of unsolved cases. They don't end when the paperwork is filed, they linger, reshaping the lives of everyone who touched them. By the late 2000s, the case is officially labeled a cold case, a term that sounds clinical but feels cruel to those still waiting, because nothing about it feels cold to them. It burns just as fiercely as it did on the first day. A specialized unit reviews it, methodical, detached, professionals trained to see patterns across decades, and they approach it like archaeologists, carefully brushing away layers of assumption to see what's actually there. They identify inconsistencies no one noticed before, timelines that don't quite align, statements that subtly changed over time, and for a brief, electric moment, it feels like something might finally give. But each potential breakthrough dissolves under scrutiny, explanations emerging that are just strong enough to hold, and the investigators are left with a familiar feeling, the sense of standing in a room full of doors that all lead back to the same place. They can explain how the case stalled, how mistakes were made, how resources were stretched thin, but explaining why it happened, who did it, and what truly occurred in those lost hours remains beyond reach. And still, the story refuses to die. It's retold at dinner tables and late-night conversations on anonymous internet forums where amateur sleuths dissect every detail with obsessive care, convinced that official investigators overlooked something obvious. Some theories are wild, others chillingly plausible, and all of them share the same flaw: none can be proven. The case becomes a mirror, reflecting whatever fear, suspicion, or fascination the viewer brings to it, and in that way it evolves, not toward resolution, but toward myth. As another decade closes, the file remains open, heavier now with history than with evidence, and the absence at its center feels almost tangible, a presence defined entirely by what isn't there. The city keeps moving, traffic roaring past the places where the story began, people hurrying by unaware that beneath their feet lies a question that has never been answered, and somewhere in that constant motion, the cold case waits, patient and unyielding, for someone, someday, to finally see what everyone else has missed, or to accept that some stories, no matter how loudly they demand an ending, are destined to remain unfinished. Time has a way of rearranging priorities, but it never loosens its grip on unresolved violence. As the case edges toward its third decade, the word cold starts to feel misleading, because nothing about it has cooled, it has only hardened, calcified into something sharp and enduring, a shard lodged deep in the collective memory of the city. New York has learned to live with unanswered questions, but this one still flares up unexpectedly, in quiet precinct offices and family kitchens, in the private thoughts of people who once crossed paths with the victim and never quite escaped the feeling that they were brushing against something dangerous without knowing it. A quiet shift happens when a younger generation of investigators takes another look, detectives who weren't even in the academy when the crime occurred, who approach the file without the emotional exhaustion of repeated failure. They don't remember the press frenzy, the political pressure, the frantic early days. They only see patterns and gaps, and sometimes that distance feels like an advantage. They notice how certain names appear again and again, not loudly, not suspiciously, but consistently, orbiting the case like small moons, never quite colliding with the truth but never drifting away either. One name in particular begins to stand out, not because of new evidence but because of timing. A person who was present at key moments, who offered help readily, who seemed eager to cooperate, maybe too eager, and who then quietly faded from the narrative as attention shifted elsewhere. Back then, investigators dismissed the oddities as personality quirks, nerves, the understandable anxiety of someone caught near a tragedy, but decades later those same details look different, sharpened by hindsight, and the detectives start pulling threads that were never fully tugged before. They re-interview witnesses who thought they were done with this part of their lives, people now older, slower, more reflective, and the conversations feel different than they did years ago. There's less bravado, less certainty, more hesitation, more admissions of what they didn't say back then, what they assumed wasn't important, what they were afraid to mention. Memory hasn't improved, but honesty has, eroded into shape by time and guilt, and even when the facts don't change, the tone does, shifting subtly towards something darker. One witness recalls a conversation overheard by accident, a raised voice behind a closed door, a phrase that felt wrong even then but seemed too vague to matter. Another admits they lied about a minor detail, not to protect anyone in particular, just to avoid being pulled deeper into something that already felt dangerous. None of it is explosive on its own, but together it creates a low hum of unease, the sense that the case didn't stall because there was nothing to find, but because what was there made people uncomfortable. The family senses the shift before it's officially acknowledged. Investigators start calling more frequently, asking more pointed questions, requesting access to old letters, photographs, personal effects that have been stored away like fragile relics. Each request carries a double edge, hope sharpened by dread, because any real movement toward the truth means reopening wounds that never truly healed. Still, they comply, because doing nothing has proven unbearable, and if pain is the price of answers, they are willing to pay it. Behind closed doors, detectives begin mapping relationships rather than events, focusing less on what happened and more on who knew whom, who trusted whom, who had leverage over whom. The picture that emerges is messy, intimate, tangled, a web of obligations and secrets that feels more like a family drama than a random act of violence. This is where cold cases often turn, away from alleyways and unknown assailants, toward kitchens, living rooms, whispered arguments, and the dangerous assumption that familiarity equals safety. A long-forgotten financial record surfaces, not damning, not definitive, but strange enough to warrant attention. Money moved quietly, explanations offered that don't quite line up with known circumstances. Investigators can't prove it's connected, but they can't ignore it either, because money has a way of exposing motivations people refuse to articulate. The numbers suggest pressure, dependency, a relationship that wasn't as equal as it appeared, and suddenly the emotional landscape of the case begins to tilt. Then comes the document that changes the tone of everything, an old piece of correspondence, misfiled, overlooked, or simply misunderstood at the time, now reread with fresh eyes. It isn't a confession, it isn't a threat, it's something more insidious, a hint of knowledge the writer shouldn't have had, a casual reference to a detail that wasn't public, wasn't widely shared, wasn't supposed to be known outside a very small circle. It's the kind of detail that doesn't scream guilt but whispers familiarity, and that whisper echoes loudly in a room full of investigators trained to listen for exactly that. The suspect is approached carefully, decades after the fact, life lived, reputation built, scars accumulated in places no one else can see. They are polite, cooperative, almost relieved to talk, as if the knock on the door has been expected for years. They answer questions calmly, their story polished by time, consistent in its broad strokes, but when detectives press on specifics, the cracks begin to show, small pauses, slight changes in wording. Moments where the narrative slips just enough to reveal uncertainty beneath. There is no dramatic confrontation, no sudden breakdown, just a growing sense that the room is filling with something heavy and unspoken. The suspect insists they loved the victim, insists they would never cause harm, and investigators believe that might even be true, because love and violence are not opposites, they often coexist in the same fragile space. What matters is not what the suspect claims to feel, but what they were capable of when pushed, when cornered, when faced with the possibility of losing control. For the first time in years, the case feels close, not solved, but narrowed, focused, and that focus brings with it a terrifying clarity. Investigators begin to suspect that the reason the case endured wasn't because the perpetrator was brilliant or elusive, but because the truth was too ordinary, too painful, too close to home for anyone to want to see it clearly. A secret doesn't have to be complex to survive, it just has to be shared by enough people who all benefit from keeping it buried. Legal hurdles loom large. Evidence is circumstantial, memories unreliable, physical proof degraded beyond certainty. Prosecutors are cautious, aware that moving too soon could collapse everything, that a failed case would not only deny justice but cement the mystery permanently. So the investigation advances slowly, deliberately, every step weighed against the risk of losing what little momentum has been gained. Outside the precinct, rumors begin to stir again. Whispers of a family secret, of betrayal hidden behind loyalty, of a truth so destabilizing it could fracture what remains of the victim's world. The media catches wind, headlines reappear, speculation blooms, and once more the city leans in, drawn by the familiar allure of a cold case that might finally be warming. But inside, among those closest to the file, excitement is tempered by fear. Because solving the case won't just mean identifying who did it, it will mean confronting why so many people, for so long, looked away. It will mean acknowledging that justice didn't fail because it was impossible, but because it was inconvenient, because it demanded a reckoning no one was ready to face. As the investigation inches forward, the weight of that potential truth presses down on everyone involved. The family braces for answers they've waited decades to hear, unsure whether they will bring relief or simply a new kind of grief. Investigators work late into the night, driven not by headlines or accolades but by the quiet understanding that this may be their last chance to get it right. And somewhere in the city, beneath layers of time and denial, the cold case tightens its grip, no longer content to linger as an unsolved mystery, pushing instead toward a revelation that promises to change everything, even if it comes too late to undo the damage already done. The pressure doesn't arrive all at once. It accumulates, slowly, like water behind a dam that everyone knows is cracked but no one wants to admit might give way. Inside the investigation room, the air feels heavier now, not with certainty, but with proximity. The truth is no longer abstract. It has edges. It has names attached to it. And that makes every decision dangerous. One wrong move, one premature leak, and decades of fragile progress could collapse back into silence. Detectives begin working the case in parallel tracks, one focused on what can be proven, the other on what can be understood. The first is brutal in its limitations. Physical evidence offers nothing new. Forensics can suggest, imply, narrow, but never confirm. The second track, the human one, is where the tension lives. They reconstruct relationships down to the smallest gestures, who called whom late at night, who showed up unannounced, who knew details they shouldn't have known. They study photographs not for what's visible, but for what's missing, who is always present just outside the frame, whose absence feels intentional rather than coincidental. The suspected family secret begins to take shape, not as a single explosive revelation, but as a pattern of quiet accommodations. Favors granted without explanation. Questions not asked because the answers might be unbearable. A collective agreement, unspoken but enforced, that some things were better left alone. Investigators recognize this pattern immediately. They've seen it before in other cases, other families, other communities. Silence doesn't always come from fear of punishment. Sometimes it comes from fear of destruction, the knowledge that telling the truth might shatter what little remains intact. One detective notices something unsettling in the timeline, a gap not in hours or days, but in reactions. When the disappearance first became public, most people responded with urgency, panic, confusion. But one small circle reacted with a strange calm, almost resignation, as if the outcome had already been accepted. At the time, it was chalked up to shock, to grief manifesting in different ways. Now, it reads differently, like the behavior of people who knew more than they were saying, or at least suspected something they didn't want confirmed. They return to old interview tapes, digitized now, voices crackling through outdated equipment, and they listen not for answers but for emotion. Hesitations. Deflections. Moments where a witness fills silence with unnecessary detail. In one recording, a relative speaks passionately about love and loyalty, but when asked a simple factual question, their voice drops, words slow, as if navigating a minefield. It's subtle. It's deniable. But it's there, and once seen, it can't be unseen. The suspect is brought in again, this time under a different pretext, casual, low pressure, a conversation rather than an interrogation. The detectives don't accuse. They reminisce. They talk about the city in the early 90s, about how different everything felt, about how people handled problems back then. The suspect relaxes at first, nostalgia softening their defenses, and then, almost imperceptibly, they overreach, offering a detail that doesn't match the official record, correcting a timeline they weren't supposed to know needed correcting. It's a small slip. The kind defense attorneys love to dismiss as coincidence. But to investigators, it's a flare shot into the dark. They press gently, circling back, asking the same question in different ways, and each time the answer shifts just enough to suggest that the truth isn't fixed, it's being actively maintained. The suspect remains composed, but the effort shows. This is not someone recalling events. This is someone managing them. Outside the room, legal counsel debates the next move. There is still no smoking gun, no single piece of evidence that can carry a case to trial on its own. Everything relies on accumulation, on convincing a jury that the pattern itself is the proof. It's risky. Cold cases die this way all the time, crushed under the weight of reasonable doubt. But waiting has its own risks. Witnesses are aging. Memories are fading. Time is not neutral. It favors the person who wants nothing to change. The family is informed, cautiously, that the investigation has reached a critical stage. They're told to prepare themselves, not for resolution, but for clarity. Those words land hard. Clarity doesn't promise justice. It doesn't promise peace. It only promises the end of uncertainty, and sometimes uncertainty is easier to live with than the truth. Some family members want everything exposed, no matter the cost. Others hesitate, already sensing what confirmation might demand of them, which relationships it might destroy, which cherished memories it might poison. Tension fractures the family along invisible fault lines that have existed for years. Old arguments resurface, now reframed through the lens of suspicion. Innocent moments are reinterpreted, gestures once seen as kindness now tinged with guilt. The case isn't just reopening wounds. It's rewriting history, and that is a violence of its own. Investigators watch this unfold with a mix of sympathy and detachment. They know that solving the case will not restore what was lost. It will only replace one form of pain with another. Media pressure intensifies as whispers solidify into rumors. Headlines speculate about an imminent arrest, about a shocking betrayal, about a secret hidden in plain sight for decades. The narrative grows ahead of the facts, fueled by anonymous sources and half-understood leaks. Detectives hate this part. Publicity can force hands, harden defenses, push suspects into silence or flight. But it can also do something else. It can make it harder to keep lying, especially when the lie has been propped up by collective denial. The suspect's behavior changes. Friends notice withdrawal, irritability, a fixation on past grievances. Someone mentions overhearing a late-night phone call, a voice raised, words like "after all this time" and "they can't prove anything" slipping through the walls. It's reported. It's logged. It's added to the growing mosaic of circumstantial evidence that still isn't enough, but feels increasingly suffocating. Investigators revisit the location one more time, not because they expect to find new evidence, but because places remember things people try to forget. They stand in the same spaces where key moments unfolded, measuring distances, imagining movement, reconstructing choices. One detective notices how close everything is, how easy it would have been for someone familiar with the environment to control the situation, to act quickly, decisively, without attracting attention. The crime doesn't look random from here. It looks rehearsed, or at least anticipated. A breakthrough comes not from technology or strategy, but from fatigue. A secondary witness, someone who has lived on the edge of the case for years, finally asks to speak again. Their health is failing. They don't want to die carrying this. What they offer isn't a confession, not directly, but a confirmation, an admission that they suspected the truth early on and chose silence. They describe a conversation that took place shortly after the disappearance, words spoken in confidence, heavy with implication. A clear understanding that something terrible had happened and that acknowledging it would ruin lives. This testimony changes the calculus. It doesn't prove guilt, but it proves knowledge, and knowledge has legal weight. Prosecutors see a path forward now, narrow but navigable. They begin preparing, building a case that doesn't rely on a single decisive moment, but on the cumulative force of years of deception, of opportunities to tell the truth deliberately avoided. The suspect is confronted with this new reality, not aggressively, but firmly. They are told, plainly, that the walls are closing in, that the narrative they've maintained is no longer holding, that others are talking. For the first time, something flickers across their face, not fear, but exhaustion. The performance has gone on too long. The cost has been too high. For a moment, it seems like the dam might finally break. But decades of secrecy don't unravel easily. The suspect stops short of confession, offering partial truths, reframing events, acknowledging mistakes without admitting intent. It's a strategy as old as crime itself: give just enough to appear cooperative, but not enough to condemn yourself. Investigators push, aware that this may be the closest they ever get to the core of the truth. As night falls on the city, the case hangs in a precarious balance. Arrest warrants are drafted but not signed. Statements are reviewed, revised, weighed. The family waits, suspended between dread and hope, knowing that whatever comes next will change everything. And somewhere beneath all of it, the cold case pulses with new heat, no longer dormant, no longer content to linger in the shadows, demanding resolution even as it threatens to tear apart everything it touches. The question is no longer whether the truth will surface. It's how much damage it will do when it finally does. The final hours of the investigation do not feel triumphant. They feel fragile, like glass stretched too thin. Inside the precinct, lights hum softly over desks cluttered with decades of paper and the quiet knowledge that this is as far as the road goes, one way or another. No one raises their voice. No one celebrates. Every movement is deliberate, restrained, shaped by the understanding that the truth, once spoken, cannot be taken back, and that justice, even when achieved, rarely feels like victory. The suspect sits alone for a long time before anyone speaks again. Time has done what pressure could not. It has worn down resistance, not into confession, but into something more honest and more unsettling. When the questioning resumes, the tone changes. There is no longer an attempt to trap, no dramatic reveal of evidence. Instead, there is a simple invitation, a chance to explain how things spiraled, how a moment became a lifetime, how silence grew heavier with every passing year. The room is still. The city outside keeps breathing, unaware that an old secret is finally struggling for air. The story that emerges is incomplete, fractured, offered in pieces that resist forming a clean narrative. There is acknowledgement without admission, regret without full responsibility, a careful balancing act between truth and self-preservation. The suspect speaks of fear, of consequences imagined and real, of choices made quickly and justified endlessly afterward. They speak of love warped by control, of desperation mistaken for necessity, of a belief that once enough time passed, the past would lose its power. They are wrong about that. Time has only sharpened it. Investigators listen, recording every word, aware that what's being said may never satisfy anyone fully. There is no cinematic confession, no single sentence that explains everything. Instead, there is a gradual unveiling of motive, opportunity, and awareness, enough to understand what happened without ever hearing the words everyone has waited decades for. The truth arrives sideways, indirect, but unmistakable in its shape. This was not an accident of fate. It was the result of choices, small and catastrophic, made by people who believed they could live with them. When the interview ends, the room feels emptier, as if something essential has slipped out unnoticed. Legal teams move in, careful and precise, parsing language, debating interpretation. Charges are discussed, then reconsidered. The law demands certainty, and certainty is exactly what time has eroded. Prosecutors weigh the evidence, the statements, the likelihood of conviction, and they do so knowing that pursuing justice and securing it are not the same thing. A case can be morally clear and legally fragile at the same time. The family is called in. Not all of them. Only those who need to hear it directly. What they are told is measured, restrained, but devastating. There are no graphic details, no unnecessary cruelty, just confirmation of what many of them have feared for years, that the truth was closer than they ever allowed themselves to believe. Some react with anger, some with numbness, some with a strange, hollow relief. Knowing doesn't heal them. It simply ends the waiting, and that, in itself, is overwhelming. Old alliances fracture completely now. Words that were never spoken are finally voiced, accusations surface, denials collapse. The family secret, once a vague, oppressive presence, becomes defined, and in becoming defined, it loses the power to hide. But it gains another power instead, the ability to rewrite memories, to contaminate even the good ones. Every shared holiday, every laugh, every moment of trust is reevaluated under the harsh light of what was concealed. Publicly, the resolution is careful, almost cautious. Officials announce that the investigation has reached its conclusion, that significant findings have been made, that the case is no longer unsolved. They choose their words with precision, aware of legal boundaries and ethical obligations. Headlines explode anyway, twisting nuance into certainty, branding the story with words like solved and shocking, even as the reality remains more complicated, more painful, more human than any headline can contain. Some in the city feel vindicated. Others feel betrayed. Many feel both. The cold case that once belonged to rumor and speculation now belongs to history, but history offers no comfort. There are no parades for this kind of ending. No applause. Just a collective exhale, followed by an uneasy silence as people absorb what it means that the truth was there all along, hidden not by darkness, but by familiarity. The suspect retreats from public view, a life narrowed by scrutiny, by consequence, by the weight of what can no longer be denied, even if it can't be fully punished. Justice, in its purest form, remains elusive. There is accountability, but not the kind that balances the scales. The law moves forward, but it cannot rewind time, cannot restore what was taken, cannot answer every question that still echoes unanswered in the margins of the case file. In the end, what remains is not closure, but clarity. The case is no longer a mystery, but it is still a tragedy. It stands as a reminder that some crimes don't vanish because they are unsolvable, but because solving them requires confronting truths too close, too destructive, too costly to face. And when those truths finally surface, they do not arrive like salvation. They arrive like a reckoning. The city moves on, as it always does. Streets fill with new stories, new lives, new secrets. But beneath the noise, the resolved cold case leaves its mark, a quiet warning etched into memory. That silence can be a choice. That time does not forgive. And that the most haunting mysteries are not the ones hidden in shadows, but the ones concealed in plain sight, waiting patiently for the moment when they can no longer be contained. Even after the case is declared resolved, the echo doesn't fade. Resolution, it turns out, is not an ending but a transformation. The story changes shape, from a question mark into a scar, and scars have a way of aching long after the wound has closed. In the weeks that follow the announcement, the city reacts in fragments, snippets of conversation overheard on trains, quiet debates in coffee shops, arguments carried out in low voices as if speaking too loudly might summon the past back into the room. People say the words cold case like they mean something finished, but their tone betrays them. Finished is not the same as over. Inside the family, life becomes a careful negotiation between what can be spoken and what must remain unvoiced. Some members demand details, hungry for every fact, every admission, believing that understanding each moment might dull the pain. Others retreat, refusing to hear more, convinced that too much knowledge will poison whatever peace they have left. They are all grieving now, not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of a version of their history that can never be recovered. Trust, once fractured, doesn't mend cleanly. It shifts, it settles into something unfamiliar, and everyone must decide whether they can live with its new shape. The investigators feel the aftermath differently. There is relief, yes, but it's muted, tempered by the knowledge of what justice could not do. They close the file, archive the evidence, and move on to other cases, but this one follows them in subtle ways, and how they phrase questions, and how long they linger over inconsistencies, and how skeptical they've become of easy explanations. A cold case solved late teaches a specific kind of lesson, that delay is not neutral, that every year without truth compounds the damage, spreading it outward into lives that had nothing to do with the original crime. Public attention spikes one last time, then begins its slow retreat. Documentaries are proposed, articles written, timelines reconstructed with ominous music and dramatic narration. The story becomes content, packaged and consumed, and some find that unsettling, the idea that decades of pain can be compressed into an hour-long program. Others welcome it, hoping that retelling the story might prevent another like it, that visibility might be the only justice still available. The debate itself becomes part of the legacy of the case, proof that even solved mysteries leave behind unresolved arguments. The suspect's name fades from headlines but not from memory. They live on, constrained by consequence even in the absence of a definitive verdict, their identity permanently tethered to what happened. Some believe this is not enough. Others believe it is too much. The law draws its lines imperfectly, and everyone involved is left standing somewhere near the edges, dissatisfied but resigned. There is no clean moral arithmetic here, no outcome that balances loss against accountability in a way that feels fair. Years later, someone new moves into the old neighborhood, unaware of what unfolded there, and life continues with a kind of innocent momentum. Children play on sidewalks where adults once whispered theories late into the night. Buildings stand where they always have, indifferent to memory. But stories have a way of seeping into the ground. Locals still pause when they pass certain corners, still lower their voices when the case comes up, still feel the faint chill of recognition when they hear the phrase cold case used in another context, another city, another tragedy. The family marks anniversaries differently now. No longer with pleas for answers, but with remembrance shaped by hard-earned truth. They speak the victim's name without qualifiers, without speculation, without the desperate edge of uncertainty. It doesn't make the loss lighter, but it makes it real in a way it never was before. Mourning finally has something solid to rest against, even if it's painful. What the case ultimately leaves behind is a warning disguised as a story. That proximity can blind. That silence can masquerade as protection. That time does not bury truth, it only delays its consequences. And that when answers finally arrive, they rarely bring the comfort people imagine. They bring clarity, and clarity demands responsibility from everyone who touches it. The cold case, once a symbol of mystery, becomes a symbol of something else entirely, a testament to how easily a crime can hide among ordinary lives, how long it can survive on denial alone, and how devastating it can be when the truth finally insists on being known. The city absorbs it, the way it absorbs everything, and moves forward, carrying the lesson quietly, imperfectly, into whatever story comes next.